Yo, what's up, y'all? We out here yet again. Little podcast, little update. And in this video, I want to talk about my perception of what the problems are with Adventism and Christianity in general. I have my notes here I'm going to go off of, just kind of keep my mind in line. So, I was talking with my mom recently about sharing the gospel. This idea of what does it look like? How do we do it? What is the call of sharing the gospel all about? And we had some differences in the way we view the call to share the gospel. Her idea leans more towards the perspective of there was a time to show love, and now it's more time to talk about the justice and what's coming and all of this other stuff. And it's time for the hard truth, right? And mine, I would say, acknowledges that, but I would also frame it and say that it isn't just that there was a time to share things in a loving way, and now it's time to share justice with the harshness of reality. I think both can and should be blended together. I will say that when you talk about Christianity, Adventism in particular, and you're talking about the end time message, anytime that you're talking about salvation and people being saved or lost, it's going to be a hard message, and it's going to be harder for some than others, for sure. But while that may be true, it never precludes us from needing to still express it in a loving way. I was reading through one of my favorite books here, Steps to Christ, talking about how Jesus, he spoke the truth, but always in love. He might have had a harsh rebuke, but it was impossible for him to speak those words without you hearing and feeling the love that was behind it. And we have a misconception when we look at the Gospels and we say, well, Jesus dealt with the common people in love, but he dealt in this sharp, cutting, and always derogatory tone towards the religious leaders. And we forget that no, God is love and Jesus is still love, and he was still love to both. It looked different and expressed itself differently because of who he was talking to and the context of what those people knew and understood, and the responsibility that they had to the truth. Obviously, the Pharisees had a higher level, a higher knowledge, a higher understanding than the common people. And so those messages were directed a little bit differently, but there was still love there. Well, how do you know this? Because Jesus spoke in a way that converted some Pharisees. You had Nicodemus, you had eventually Paul, you had others who were a part of that particular cast who could see the rebuke and see, oh shoot, because of this high responsibility I had being in this position, that's why he's so direct. But they could still see the call to come back into the fold, the love aspect of it, and they did. So we cannot say that Jesus only spoke with love to one kind of people and not to the others. There was still love embedded, whoever, regardless of who he spoke with. There was always love there. Just because the message in our minds is something that's going to be a hard truth to some versus others does not mean that we can take love out of the equation in our expressing of that message. God always is love. You hear that phrase all the time, God is love. But God always is love, is being a present tense word. God always is love because he was and always will be love. There isn't a certain point to where the love stopped and now this new super harsh perspective or presentation is supposed to come in at the expense of love. No, it's not biblical. Everything that happens in the Bible happens within the context of God's love. And that's hard for us to understand. It's hard for people to look at the Old Testament versus the New Testament and they say, well, what is going on here? There's an aspect of love, and maybe, I'm not saying that I have it all figured out, but what I am saying is that within the context of the story, if I believe that God is love, then there must be an aspect of love that I don't understand. If I look at this side of things and say, well, there's no love there at all. I'm not saying it's easy to understand, and I'm not saying that I have it fully figured out. But what I am saying is that maybe as a listener, I might be overestimating how much I know about love. And just within that statement, I think it's very easy and a fair thing to say that maybe a lot of us really overestimate how much we understand true love. That's a whole different discussion. I'm not not trying to get into all of that here, but the point is there. John 3:16, I think, encapsulates this perfectly. You get to see God's investment and the relationship, the desire for relationship with us. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. We see the goal, we see the purpose, and we see what God is willing to do to allow that purpose to be realized by everybody, whoever would accept, right? And we see that this is something that's expressed through true love, but there's also a call in a way that we should, or that God would hope that we respond to that expression of love. And as we see all of that, we tend to skip a step. We need to realize that it isn't good enough to just say, well, it isn't good enough to see somebody that we don't know doing something that we don't like and just saying, well, I'm telling you this because I love you. Hey man, you need to stop that or you're going to hell. I'm telling you this because I love you. And the response is, well, who are you and who is God? None of that stuff means anything without a relationship. And you have to have love present for there to be relationship. If somebody doesn't understand why you are sharing something with them, if the common ground hasn't been established so that someone can even accept you telling that, or they're not inviting for you to open up in that way to them, how can you call that love? I don't think that you can. And I think that the example of God himself in John 3:16 proves it to us by sending his Son as a sacrifice to die for us. He showed us the relationship and he showed us the love that he has for us. And so we have the proof. In other words, that's what I'm saying. We have the proof that what God tells us and what he asks of us is out of love because of what he has done for us. But I can't just refer to that verse and not show up and do anything for the people around me. But the only thing I want to tell them is do this or you're going to hell, and then call that love. They're not the same. They're not the same. I think we have to realize that. If the people that we talk to cannot see the love that we have for them, they're not going to see what we're saying as being relevant for them. That's the key. They have to be able to see the love, which means we have to be intentional with relationship building. We have to be intentional with how we engage with and how we approach people if we want them to understand or even be open to what we have to say. Love implies relationship. It implies trust. Love, it's not just a trump card or a bailout word that you can just throw into the conversation to excuse hurting people's feelings without being willing to invest anything on my end. But it's thrown around like that a lot, to where people will just throw out the harshest things without any relationship and just say, well, I'm telling you this because I love you. It's like, you think about this from a purely logical perspective. Somebody random comes up to you and tells you they love you, but they don't know you, and you know that you don't know them. How can that be love? But within Christianity and Adventism, and sometimes when we talk about getting the gospel, the three angels messages out there, we do this. I put this on the radio and you have access to radio. So that's how I'm showing my love for you, because I'm telling you the truth and you have the opportunity to listen. But where's the relationship? Where's the trust? If there's none of that there, if there's no actual investment on that other end, it's hard for me to say that it's a relationship or trust. How many of you have been in a relationship, or you thought you were in a relationship where you were the only one investing? Is that really a relationship? Was there really love? Was there really trust? How does it feel when the other person goes and does something else or decides that they don't want to be in that relationship anymore based on what you experienced and it felt like you were the only one contributing? It's a strange thing. And I can guarantee you that the relationship where you're both investing, those changes catch you more off guard because it felt like you were both in it. And while it still might hurt, if something happens in a situation where you're the only one investing, hopefully you're able to realize, well, wait a second, they weren't really about this anyway. So how personally can you really take it if they weren't trying to be personal with it with you? But when it comes to the gospel, the same irrational logic applies. If there's not investment both ways, then why should we feel as bad? Why shouldn't we take it so personal? It does become more personal when we are investing both ways. And that's how the gospel should be. There should be an investment both ways. I allow other people to invest in me and I invest in them. And then this is what opens the door for this truth and this honesty. We see it in relationships, we see it in real life, and it's the same way in the spiritual. If I'm trying to reach somebody and truly connect with them, it can't just be something that I am giving everything to and not giving them a chance, not taking anything from them. There has to be a mutual investment. There has to be. When we approach sharing the good news like this, in this kind of one-sided, I don't really want to get to know you, but I'm going to tell you this and then claim it's because I love you. Not only do we turn good news into bad news, but as professed Christians, we aren't even being like who Christ was. We're not even following his example anymore. And what is a Christian who is not modeling Christ? A lot of people would call that a hypocrite. Probably rightfully so. Some might have another name for it. I'm sure there might be some very hateful and very derogatory things that people might have to call that. Might be something much worse. Who knows? I don't know. But what I do know is that whatever that thing would be, the Christian who doesn't model Christ, whatever that thing is, it's definitely not something or someone that anybody else is going to be willing to follow or be influenced by. It's not going to be anything that someone is inspired to follow. Some of my thoughts. But what do you think? Let me know. And I'll catch you in the next one, all right? Peace.